Welcome everyone, Questine here with an update on range combat improvements in patch 5.0 Thrones of Decay. So I did a video on the subject of how range combat has been improved from what I've personally noticed, but how range combat hasn't been improved in patch 5.0 compared to where things were before. And to me, it is a fairly noticeable improvement. Now, you will not necessarily notice an improvement when ranged is, when you're firing from a long distance. Where you will notice an improvement, and I did also want to show off Claw, where you will notice a genuine improvement is more so at close range, like knife fighting range. Like when different armies engage very, very close together to one another, that's where you will genuinely see the largest share of improvements compared to how things have been on live. Belegar, by the way, is throwing 2 full stacks against me. This is like a disaster battle, to be quite honest. I didn't expect him to attack over here because I do have a pretty good solid army. Though, on the live version, I probably wouldn't build a full army in a campaign like this. The reason I wouldn't build an army like this is because you end up in those situations like, yeah, when they fire, they do a lot of damage, they're very useful. But what happens in those situations where they can't fire? And the reason they wouldn't be able to fire in quite a few situations is because, like, oh, there's a bit of a bump in the road, or there's a siege and they can't fire in a siege, or whatever, right? So that does happen far more frequently than some people would care to acknowledge. Like, some people looked at that video and said, oh, there's no difference. I'm like, okay, you tell me that you've never been in a siege and you have never noticed a situation where, like, you've got the gate open, smashed open, for instance. You've got a unit standing still, as rare as that is, but you've got the unit, an enemy unit, standing still behind that particular gate, and yet your own unit is refusing to fire, because that does happen. That does happen a lot in the current live version, and it's particularly infuriating and a joke. And it makes it so that gunpowder units in particular, but it's not just exclusive to gunpowder units. I wish to stress that out. The improvements in general, like gunpowder, is the biggest beneficiary of how things have been improved, to be sure, but is not just a question of like, oh, gunpowder units work better. No, all units, all ranged units, ranged heroes, ranged lords, all of them work far better. Like, one of the things I want you guys to pay attention to during the course of this particular battle is like how often these icons, these arrow icons, are how often they're going to turn. How often are they going to turn orange? Because that means the unit at that moment is, for whatever reason, not firing. Also, I would like to point out that in current live version, I would never deploy like warp grinders like this. Like, I would never, like, I would try not to deploy them like this, because they just wouldn't fire a lot of the time. Like, flat out would refuse to fire, especially like once you got once you got to this particular range. Like, it happens that, oh, you get engaged in a duel, cute. Your guns that are supposed to support you in that particular duel are no longer gonna support you whatsoever, right? Like, over here, like, yeah, these guys have stopped firing. Let's adjust them. Or 2 units on our melee, even though you might have line of sight, they're not gonna be able to get proper shots off. And that is where things get really, really infuriating in the current live version. It's those situations. Now, you still have to care about positioning. You still have to care about, like, oh, where am I putting my guys? Like, what angle are they facing? Like, is there a mosh pit of units, blocking the way, like is happening here, right? That still does matter. That's undeniable. But what is important Although I think... No, my Giselles are standing still. No, that's not the problem. So I was a bit worried there. It's like that maybe they had moved out of position. Or they're fine. They might not be so fine, but, you know, you just gotta work with what you've got. So, like, Plague Claw is doing a lot of damage. Like, this is 2 full stacks of doors. Is a pretty nasty situation, not gonna lie. Like, it is a fairly nasty affair that I'm dealing with right here. Rangers engaging right there. Let's try and engage them ourselves, right? Try and stop them. Let's summon more clan rats. Let's get those rallying. So it's like these kind of situations where it is tricky, like, because they'll stop firing in the one moment when you actually do need them to actually fire properly. That's when they'll stop firing. That's when the things are gonna get nasty. That's when you lose the battle because, like, oh, Vlad entered your army. Good luck killing him, basically. Fun fact about that, about Vlad specifically. I fought a battle against Vlad with, like, early game army, and honestly, I kind of believed I would win, but I imagine it would be a battle against Vlad, and anyone who's ever fought Vlad in Warhammer 3 knows in a campaign that unless you've got overwhelming force, for the most part, he will pulverize you, right? He'll inflict significant casualties. Like, I fought a battle as Katrin. I had Gotrek and Felix. I had like 6 heroes, lords, all that fighting, you know, targeting Vlad and Isabella, and it's like I killed them, I won, but that was an experience, let's just say. And that's just Vlad in a nutshell in the campaign, as he is. Like, he's really, really, really hard to kill. Very difficult to pull it off. And yet, I fought a battle in the current patch in the campaign, not the France one, but an Imperial campaign. Fought a battle. I mean, there's still some micromanagement that's going to be required, right? Because, like, when you're this close, that's when things collapse. But, like, if there's a direct line of sight, they should fire. Over here, woods or not, right? And yes, it is, but, like, I like the, like, you know, I got the hero duel going on over here, you know, trying to kill Belagar, flamethrowers helping out, you know, dwarf warriors going in there, let's summon some clan rats. What I've noticed, okay, so the battle's won. So what I've noticed consistently in my 60 plus hours of playing this this patch, this is what I've noticed, even though I've taken some heavy casualties over there. What I have personally noticed is that I don't have to micromanage range units as much. That means they do more damage. That means they're more effective, especially when we're talking about, like, you know, the knife fighting. I think the engineer might be alive there. That's the reason I haven't won. There we go. He's dead. So that's what I have personally noticed. By the way, I didn't necessarily play that battle in a perfect fashion. So just overall, like, I know it sounds crappy to say it, it just feels better. And it's hard to replicate because if you set up a small number of units to test it out, then that's irrelevant because it's not relevant with a small number of units. Like, yeah, I can set up 2 battles against, like, you know, 2 battles in both live and beta version and test out, like, oh, how long does it take to kill for me to kill Malus Arcblade when he's engaged in a duel with Karl Franz? It's about the same. But that's not the real test, because the real stress point is not that situation. The real stress point, what happens when you got 40 units versus 40 units, engaging each other, it's chaotic, it's messy, and you can't replicate that. Certainly not against AI, because the AI is going to make different decisions. Like, you could play the same battle over and over again, and I have over here with this battle to see how this works, and yeah, positioning still matters a lot. If there's a mosh pit of melee units, maybe your units won't fire. You'll still have to use proper tactics, but you won't have situations, or certainly you won't have anywhere near as many situations where you have a clear line of sight against the enemy and they're not firing. You won't have a situation where your gunpowder units or range units refuse to fire in a duel, for instance, which is actually one of the things that really, really hurts you against Vlad, for instance. Okay, so aftermath of the battle. Giselles did a good amount of damage. Flamethrowers did a good amount of damage. So it's not the unit kills that matter. It's like the damage dealt. So you can see like Rattling Gunners. Some of them did fairly little. Like Rattling Gunners still require better position and all that. This was a nightmarish situation, right? Like this was a nightmarish battle. Like almost 2 full stacks against an army led by a guy in Force March and Ikaclaw, who was reinforcing, and a very damaged Garrison supporting. Just going to point this out, by the way. Like, I tried playing this battle with, without controlling a large army, so that I could deal with one of these stacks at a time. And what I noticed, like, yeah, I only got 20 units, but he got all of these. So maybe I don't know what to make of that. Like, we need patch notes. We don't have patch notes. One experience I did have very recently, like anyone who's ever played the Dwarf campaign, an Empire campaign, knows exactly what I'm about to talk about. Kislev campaign, even. I went up against Vlad in a battle. I posted a screenshot of this, right? The aftermath of that. I didn't just win, I obliterated him. Like, genuinely so. Isabella, like, if I blinked, I missed it. That's how quick, like, she died to a couple of handgunner units. Well, a couple, 6. Let's just say 6. Sure, you might say, oh, you can do that in skirmish, right? Yeah, but, and Vlad died, he took longer because he's far more durable, he's on foot, so he's harder to target. She was obviously on her mount, flying towards me. Yeah, but anyone who's ever played against Vlad and Isabella knows exactly what happens. You can have an entire freaking stack of 20 plus units targeting them before they reach a line. Maybe you kill them, maybe you drop them to half HP, but obliterating them in seconds... I don't know what kind of units you need to have for that, right? Maybe a full army of Akshina could do it. Streltsy maybe. But it's difficult, right? And yet, I was able to drop them dead. Like, literally, the battle was decided by my gunpowder units. In that situation, I was and I'm not talking like high-end gunpowder units. I'm talking here regular Empire handgunners. Obliterated Vlad. He was higher level than me. He had all his items. I had an army you can acquire in the early game, and I didn't just win, I smashed him to pieces. I have fought battles against Vlad, many battles against Vlad, where I could take an entire stack of dwarves, quarrelers, thunderers, heroes, lords. I could throw it against him, and he would survive. And then he would enter the melee, regenerate all of his HP, and kill me. He might be the last thing standing on the field of battle, but he would obliterate me. I wish I could show you that battle. I will eventually, but I can't at the moment. The only solution I had in terms of consistently killing Vlad in a field battle was not range. Like, I couldn't rely on range. Now, apparently I can. I had to rely on either distracting him for a very long time, so he runs around the battlefield. Like, this is the strategy that you can use against Grimoire as well, because if Grimoire is coming towards your army, you will lose. So you need to distract them somehow. Or you needed to have such melee power that you could throw a large enough hero stack, lord stack, that you could defeat him. And I did that with Katrin. Because, granted, I only had Kossars, regular Kossars, that range units there, but that guy can fight a hero group of Gotrek, Felix, Patriarch, Katrin, the legendary hero that was at Kislev, Frost Maidens, and all that. I almost lost that. That was a lot of armies, but he was in Force March. And well, I believe he was in Force March. No, he wasn't in Force March in that one. But jeez. So, yeah, Vlad is more manageable in general. Like, this, just going back to this battle, I would not have built an army like this in the live version to deal with Belegar. And I certainly don't think I would have been able to win a battle where he threw this many troops against me. And he didn't just throw dwarf warriors. He didn't just throw miners and dwarf warriors against me. Yeah, he had a lot of those. But he threw all of his legendary heroes. He threw a Demon Slayer. He threw Quarrelers, Thunderers, Iron Drakes, Trollhammer torpedoes. And yeah, I won. That, like... I don't think I could pull it off in the live version. Just because what would happen, yeah, I would do damage from range. But once you got in the knife range, it would all be over. Sure, I did everything possible I can. Like, you still need to worry about that. I did everything I absolutely can to delay him from getting there, I drop my nukes, I try to do as much damage with the nuke, etc., etc. And it still was pretty brutal. It might seem microscopic in a way, I guess. But it is a significant enough difference that you don't necessarily, like if you're doing a test one-on-one, you may not necessarily figure out, but you do notice it when you fight when you fight many battles for a campaign. Another thing I want to say about this, just before I end it, range lords, range heroes. I have fought plenty of campaigns as a Leafanar. I have several of them on this channel. I have fought plenty of campaigns as cast dwarves, etc. One of the most useless things in those campaigns for a Leafanar himself in battle. Like, the best I can do with the Leafanar live version is use him as a distraction. Yes, he can do some range damage. I can use all his ammunition. But there's so many situations where he's doing squat, right? Ranged heroes. Gunpowder ranged heroes specifically. In this patch that I have right here, they can do a truckload of damage, especially in a field battle. Like, if I had an engineer, like, actually looking at his engineer, right, he did 2,500 damage, and that's under AI control. So, by the way, those range improvements I'm talking about, they're going to affect AI as well. So, you might have a harder time as a player dealing with range armor. The unit that got the most kill was a hammer. Yeah, don't underestimate the gold-ranked hammer. That was... that was an endgame crisis level tier army right there. But point is, like, with range gunpowder heroes, like, I fought so many battles as cast dwarves where I just so desperately trying to get any freaking uses of infernal castellans, and I'm not. Like, obviously the ones that, you know, the mages that go on mounts, their little pistol, yeah, they can do damage because they're elevated. That's the thing. But the one on foot, useless. Now, however, with engineers, and just in general, ranged heroes, ranged gunpowder heroes, ranged bow heroes, crossbows, all that, they just are far more effective. I don't know what CA changed. Like, I admit, I don't know what CA changed. Does this mean gunpowder units are the best unit? Well, let me put it like this. Pre-patch, I would not recruit handgunners as the Empire would go crossbow huntsman. Now, I'm not recruiting anything but freaking handgunners. Unless, like, you know, I have no choice, I can't get to the tier, I can't get the buildings, I have other priorities. But if I have a choice, right, between handgunners and crossbows, I'm going handgunners, 100%. There's still some issues in sieges. Obviously, it helps to have cannons early on. So, you know, combination of things, right, helps make, like, having different unit types for the Empire and all that helps the situation. But range just performing better and not requiring as much freaking micromanagement is also better. Like, look at the battles I have in the patch and just let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned for more.